Okay, welcome. What we're doing today is an exploratory analysis of a proposed systemic architecture. Now, just to be clear, we're not here to talk politics or to endorse or critique any of it. Instead, we're going to treat this whole thing as a research artifact. Our job is to map its structure, deconstruct its core mechanisms, and most importantly, identify the key open questions that are still on the table.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll just observe the individual components as they're presented. Then, we're going to really deconstruct the core engine that powers the whole system. After that, we'll stress test the model's key assumptions, try to find its breaking points. And finally, we'll identify some actual signals that would tell us if this could work in the real world. And then we'll lay out the big open questions for the next investigator to pick up.
So when you first look at the source material for this project, it really just seems like a random collection of ambitious, maybe even disconnected policy ideas.
I mean, on one hand, you've got something like the Pets Care for All and Humane Fertility Control Act, which is basically about universal vet care.
Then, in a completely different direction, you see things like the National Wildfire Drone Response Act, which is all about using autonomous drones to fight wildfires.
And then you get these proposals with absolutely massive financial implications, like the Patriotic Contribution and Exit Tax Act. This one would slap a huge tax on billionaires who renounce their citizenship. We're talking up to 50% of their entire net worth.
So, the big question is this just a laundry list of progressive ideas? A grab bag? Or is there something deeper connecting all of these? Is there some kind of hidden architecture, a single engine that's actually powering all of them? Well, the source material itself suggests there is. It points to one common power source for every single one of these proposals.
So let's get to the core of this model and see how it's all put together. The entire system, every single one of those proposals we just saw, it's all powered by one single, pretty radical piece of legislation.
And here it is. This is the Systems Engine, the Economic Liberation and Total Transparency Act. It is a truly radical idea. The proposal is to completely scrap the current federal tax system. No more income tax, no corporate tax, no payroll tax, and you replace all of it with a single, comprehensive tax on assets.
Now, this slide really gets to the heart of the structural shift here. It's a fundamental change from taxing economic flow, your paycheck, a company's profits, the money you spend, to taxing the stock of accumulated wealth. From a structural standpoint, this is a huge deal because it completely changes what the government's revenue is tied to. It's no longer about ongoing economic activity, but about the existing pool of private capital.
So, how does it actually work? Well, it's a multi-tiered system. It's not a flat tax. You have different rates for different kinds of assets. So, for example, liquid assets like cash and stocks get taxed at 5%, but business ownership gets taxed at 6%. The system also builds in some specific exemptions, like for your main home or for equity in a small business.
According to the model, this new tax base would generate nearly $7 trillion in revenue every year. That number isn't just a budget figure. It represents the sheer scale of the energy that's needed to power every other part of this entire proposed architecture.
So, if you have this massive influx of capital, how does the model propose to route it? Where does all that money go? And, just as importantly, in what order?
The structure for routing the capital is actually very clear. There's a hierarchy. First, the revenue is collected from the total asset base. Then, that money is used to fund a specific set of universal provisions first, and only after those are paid for does the rest of the money get allocated to all the other discretionary programs.
And what are those primary universal provisions? Well, there are two of them, and they get first dibs on all the revenue. The first is a universal basic income, or a freedom dividend, of $3,000 a month for every adult citizen. The second is a comprehensive, single-payer healthcare system.
Now, this dependency on that central funding engine, it's not subtle, it's explicit. If you dig into the text of every single one of those proposed acts, from groundwater preservation to the drone firefighting we mentioned, you find this exact phrase. It's probably the clearest signal you could ask for that these aren't just standalone ideas. They're all peripherals plugged into one single power source.
Okay, so an engine this powerful is going to require some equally powerful constraints to keep it from flying apart. This is where we start to really stress test the model. We're going to look at its built-in boundaries and try to identify its potential failure points.
The main constraint against capital flight, people just taking their money and leaving, is this incredibly steep exit tax. For someone with over $1 billion, the proposed tax is 50% of their total net worth. This isn't just a fine or a penalty. It's a structural necessity. Without a constraint this strong, the entire asset base that the system depends on could just walk out the door.
And holding this entire thing up is one crucial and completely untested technological assumption. The idea is that a combination of AI and blockchain technology can create a perfect global asset registry. The model literally states that this makes evasion impossible, a claim that's basically the system's primary load-bearing wall.
And this brings us right to the boundaries of the model, right? The potential failure modes. We have to think about the behavioral responses. What if people just decide to spend their wealth instead of investing it? What about the technical feasibility of this global ledger? Could it stand up to attacks from state-level actors? Then there are the unknown ripple effects of just getting rid of income taxes altogether. And of course, the almost certain geopolitical backlash. Any one of these could blow a hole in the model's projections.
So, to treat this as a serious research artifact, we have to get beyond theory. We need to identify concrete, testable predictions that the model makes. We need signals that we could actually go out and measure in the real world.
If a system like this were ever put into place, you could track some very specific signals. For example, you could measure the gap between reported offshore wealth and what we estimate is actually there. You could track the expatriation rates among the super wealthy. You could analyze the relationship between GDP growth and the total asset base. These metrics would give us hard data to either validate or, and this is the key part, falsify the model's core hypotheses.
So, we're not going to end this with a neat summary of all the answers. Instead, we're going to conclude with a handoff, a list of the most critical uncertainties and the key questions that demand more investigation.
And look, these are not rhetorical questions. They represent the unresolved variables that sit right at the heart of this model. Each one of them needs rigorous, dispassionate analysis if we're ever going to truly understand the boundaries and the potential outcomes of a system like this. And that leaves us with one final thought. The model's central premise, this idea of total financial transparency, it forces us to think beyond just its own mechanics. It makes us wonder what entirely new economic and social structures might start to emerge in a world where every single asset is visible, and what brand new questions we would need to start asking then.